Hello, everybody. If you're here for my talk, it is So You Want to Be a Pentester. I am Calvin Hedler. On the schedule, I think I'm Absolute0x0. That's what I go by on IRC. So first, a little bit about me. On Twitter, you can find me at 001Spartan. I am a pen tester with a company called Networks Group in downtown Ann Arbor. I'm a speed skater. I strap blades to my feet and go 25 miles an hour down an ice rink. And I'm also a student at Eastern Michigan University. So my objective with this talk is to give people a little bit more information about what it's like when you want to get into pen testing. I'm aiming this talk at people where I was maybe a year and a half ago when I was first starting to get into the industry, when I wanted to be a pen tester but didn't really have an idea what to expect from that. So I'll start off by asking how many people here want to be pen testers or are college students who want to get into more the red team side of things. Good. So you guys are the people who I'm aiming this talk at. I want to give you an idea of lessons I've learned, what to do, what not to do, what to expect from your first engagement. So we're going to start off with a couple things on what you need to do before the engagement. You want to prepare your gear. You want to know your tools, you want to plan ahead, and you want to be able to find the goodies. And I'm going to go into a little bit more about what each of these means, because they're concepts that I wasn't familiar with when I started, and they're concepts that I think are very important to be a good pen tester. And the first, of course, is to prepare your gear. If you're like me, you've got way too many things. You've got laptops, you've got phones, you've got all your fancy rubber duckies and Wi-Fi pineapples, Wi-Fi adapters, things like that. And you need to have all of them beforehand. You need to, make a list, check it twice, make sure you have everything. Because if you go on site and you're missing a vital piece of gear, you're going to fail. And nobody wants to fail on their first engagement. Then you need to know your tools. Nmap is a good example. I'm pretty sure that every person who's been doing network security for a long time here knows what Nmap is and knows how to use it. But as a pen tester, we need to make sure we know our tools and know where they fail. We need to know what it does. We need to know how it operates. We need to know what happens when it fails, and how it can be caught. So, for example, if you're using Metasploit and you're PSExecing into a box, if you get a failure, you need to be able to diagnose what it means, how you can get around it, what settings you can change in order for it to succeed. You need to know if the blue team is going to catch it, because obviously as a pen tester, you don't want to be caught by the blue team. The defenders catching you is a bad thing most of the time. And then you want to plan ahead. And having a game plan is very important because you want to know what your objectives are for the engagement. Every engagement is going to be different. Sometimes your goal is to just get into a specific server. Other times your goal is to find PCI data. Other times it's HIPAA data, social security numbers, or it might be showing that you can disrupt business operations. As a pen tester, I think that's something that not a lot of people getting into the field understand. You need to be able to show how you affect the business. A CEO doesn't care if you get domain admin because a CEO doesn't know what domain admin means. He doesn't know the ramifications of it. What he does know the ramifications of, if they're a widget company, show that you can stop them from making widgets completely. Show them that you can steal their secret widget information. Show them that you can, grind business to a halt if you're an attacker. You need to demonstrate what an attacker could do, not just say, oh, I got domain admin, I'm the best. That's not the goal. You need to know how you're going to accomplish your goals. You need to know what tools you can use to do certain things. You need to have a pretty good idea of what their network is going to look like when you get inside. You need to know when you're going to do things. You need to have a clear timeline that says, after I've completed this step, I can move on to the next step. And you need to know when to call it quits, because sometimes you won't manage to get everything you wanted to, and you will need to say, I've spent enough time on this, time to move on. I'm wasting too much time here. And then you want to find the goodies. That might not mean much to you. So what is that? What does the client do? I talked about this before. You want to show impact. You want to show business impact, because if you're not showing that, you're not reaching the C-suite. You're not showing to executives, hey, you have a problem here. You need to fix this, or your bottom line is going going to be impacted. You need to show that you could cause financial damage or reputation damage as an attacker if you do manage to break into their network or breach certain systems. You need to show the impact of that. So you need to know what your client does. Then, what does an attacker want? If you're an attacker, what are you going to go for? An attacker might not be interested in domain admin if they can get all the information they need from a server, from a file share, or if they can get it all from a user's workstation. You don't need domain admin every time, and that's not the goal of every pen test. And then you need to ask, what is the client worried about? You can ask them when you're face to face with them. What are you worried about? Have you been breached before? If they've been breached before, go after that because they're concerned about that. And that's going to show that you are helping improve their security posture. You're showing them that you can breach the data that they care about. And that's a very important thing that a lot of pen testers or prospective pen testers don't see it enough. So now I'll talk about a little bit what not to do. You don't want to get cocky. You don't want to damage systems. You don't want to create insecurities, and you don't want to get caught. That last one is kind of optional depending on the style of the engagement. But for the most part, you don't want to get caught. So first, don't get cocky. Something that everybody needs to understand is that pen testers are not there to look cool. Yeah, it's awesome when you say, hey, I got domain admin in 2 hours. I'm the best. I'm awesome at pen testing. But the client doesn't care about that. The client doesn't think it's cool when you manage to get domain admin in 2 hours. They don't care about that. What they care about is you're there to do a job, and you need to realize that. It's not all fun and games. Yes, it is cool. Yes, it is fun to do this stuff, but that's not your primary purpose there. You're there to do your job, and your job is to demonstrate security issues. And that's that. Next, don't break things. And that seems kind of contradictory because as a pen tester, what I do is break things. But you need to make sure you're breaking them in controlled ways and not crashing systems. Crashing production systems is bad. If you try and run a hash dump on a domain controller with, 100,000 hashes, it might crash. It might run out of memory. That's not a good thing. So far I've avoided doing that, but it's come pretty close to, eating up all the RAM on the domain controller. Not a good idea. So try and avoid crashing production systems. Also, don't alter data. You do not want to drop all the tables in a SQL database. You do not want to delete user accounts or do an rm-rf on their production web server or something silly like that. That should go without saying, but I wanted to emphasize that because that is not a good thing to do. And don't change settings because maybe they are relying on a certain setting being the way it is. If you don't know the ramifications of the setting you're about to change, of the registry edit you're about to make to get at the awesome data that you want to get to, be very careful. Be very, very sure that what you're doing is not going to impact production systems or bring down the entire domain. That is not a good thing. And that kind of goes along with my next point, which is don't create insecurity. Because as pen testers, sometimes we'll come across a box that's slightly misconfigured. You need a certain registry setting to be changed. You need a certain port to be open. You need a certain service to be running. That can create insecurity. If you're opening up a hole that another attacker could use, you need to be sure that you're not exposing the company unnecessarily. Because as a pen tester, your job is to help them make their security better. If you're poking holes in their firewall, if you're creating accounts with weak passwords or stupid stuff like that, you're causing an issue that you are there to solve. And that's a really important thing. Your job is to help them fix it, not to make things worse. You need to make sure that you're not leaking data. You're not sending it plain text HTTP to a public site or something like that. You need to make sure that you're not exposing systems unnecessarily. You need to be very, very careful whenever you do anything like that, because if you're not paying attention, you're part of the problem. And as pen testers, you're supposed to help fix the problem. And the last point that I said was kind of optional in some engagements is don't get caught. You need to understand what is noisy. On your network, what is going to cause a lot of noise, what's going to cause the blue team's firewalls to light up like Christmas trees, what's going to flood the switches with packets. Crashing the network is not something we're there to do. A lot of these tools, if used in the wrong way, can be noisy, can get caught very easily. You also need to know what sort of defenses they have. What are they going to catch? Are they going to catch an interpreter being spawned on port 4444? Because that's the port that every single, default setting 4444. And that's probably going to catch someone's eye if they see that. If you're spawning, a plain text shell, they're probably going to see that. You need to understand your footprint when you're using these tools. You need to understand what's going to happen when you psexec. If they've got endpoint security that's going to detect you, probably find another way. And also, part of getting caught, if you're doing a physical test, how much will bail be if you're arrested? Because that is an important consideration. We have get out of jail free cards. You need to make sure you have that on you. Getting caught is obviously never part of the plan, but if you do get caught, will there be cops? Will there be people with guns? You might want to be extra careful in those cases. So now I'm going to go through with a case study. This is a large retailer, thousands and thousands of employees, billions of dollars in revenue, and they had 6-character passwords, which is why we got in. I'm going to take you through this step by step. We're going to explain what I did at each step of the way. This was a team engagement with 2 other teammates, and we made pretty short work of them. And we had a lot of fun while we were doing it. But again, we weren't there just to have fun. We were there to do our jobs and to help them fix issues in their environment. So the first stage is always external. You want to enumerate their applications, identify their footprint. What applications do they have on the web? Are there web apps? Are there login points for FTP or SSH or Telnet? What kind of footprint do they have externally? That also goes with open source intelligence collection. What can you find out about them before you touch their systems actively? When you're doing open source intelligence, you can often gain a lot of information that they don't know is out there. That can be very, very important to show them, because if you find out that employees are posting their usernames and passwords, or you find out that employees are posting pictures of their badges, you can easily clone them. Or you can find a post on a forum of an employee saying, "Man, I hate how people always sneak in this door and how they never lock it." That's a good tip, and that's something you should be looking for. And that's entirely passive. That's stuff you can find just on the internet. But you also need to enumerate applications, which is web apps, services open, if they have remote desktop, if they have a Citrix server, if they have, email exposed to the internet. That's important because all of those are what we call entry points. And entry points are anywhere where you can put in a username and a password and you get inside information, or you get to internal systems. Entry points can be FTP, they can be mail, they can be SharePoint, they can be any number of things, a VPN, any number of things. And then, what does that give you? Then, after you identify the entry points, you can perform attacks against those. Sometimes they'll have an easily exploitable remote code execution, sometimes not. In this case, what we did is we took a large list of usernames that we found, because we found their username schema, and we ran a single password against that list over and over until we found one person who used this password. It was the season and the year. If we were doing this now, it'd be summer 16, summer 2016, fall 16. If anybody here has a password like that, please change that, because I will find that and I will use it to get into your corporation. Please change that. It works every time. It shouldn't work. There's no excuse for that. Sometimes you'll even get lucky and find password 1. That's another popular choice. It's not more secure if you add a 1 to the end of your password. Please change it. So we used that to log into their VPN. We had a client system. We managed to get a shell on it. We were looking around. It was a developer machine, if I recall correctly. We had some level of access. Then we ran out of time. It was the last day of the external engagement before we went on site. And that'll happen. Like I said, you need to have a plan. If you run out of time, if you spend too long doing one step in the engagement, You are going to run out of time. You're not going to get everything you want. It happens, but you need to deal with it. Had we realized how much access we had at this point, we could have gotten domain admin in the same way we ended up getting it. But we got a good deal of information. We demonstrated that they had serious security issues. So we did our job for the external. So then we moved on to the internal phase. Internal. Start out by running something called Responder. Who here knows what Responder is? Not as many people. But Responder, for those who don't know, is an LLMNR and NBTNS spoofer. What that does is Windows will send out name requests across the network, multicast, so anybody on the network who sees these requests can respond and say, hey, I'm this box, you should authenticate to me. And your victim, willing or unwilling, will send you back a password hash, and you can easily crack that. That's probably how we get domain admin on a good half or more of our engagements, because Responder will always work. People don't turn off this feature, and people use weak passwords. This can be mitigated in many ways. You can disable LLMNR or NBTNS. You can use strong passwords. People don't like to use strong passwords. This is 2016. We've been telling people this for years now. They still don't use strong passwords. So it's important to demonstrate why it's important to an organization so that they can start to shift their culture or to yell at their employees some more. It doesn't always help, of course, but we do what we can as pen testers to say, hey, you've got a problem here. You should take a look at that. While we're running Responder, waiting for those replies to come in, waiting to grab those password hashes, you enumerate. You use tools like NBT scan, which does NetBIOS scans. You use tools like Nmap, which just scans ports. You scan for SMB shares. You scan for for printers or whatever. That can also be a fun way to get into a network or to gain a foothold. You scan for you scan for VNC on people's computers that might not have a password or might just be using password as a password. VNC123 is another popular one. And you scan for as much as you can. The more information you get, the easier it'll be to continue the next phase of the engagement. You do enumeration, more enumeration, a lot of enumeration. It's a lot of time sitting and waiting for scans to happen while you figure out what other types of scans to run. And by this point, we had found a domain admin password hash, and we cracked it because it was 6 characters. This was a domain administrator password, 6 characters. It had not been used in years, but some service was using this, so it passed it across the network to us. If you have a domain admin account, what can you do? You can do pretty much everything, right? So you should probably protect that with a strong password. 6 characters? Does anybody here think that 6 characters is a strong password? Yes, as complex as the characters might be, if you have no plot, you're not going to go anywhere. Sorry. But yeah, 6 characters, doesn't matter how complex it is, we're going to crack that in about 2 minutes or less. So what next? Like I said, you want to find the goodies. What are the goodies? This was a retailer. Goodies were credit card numbers, healthcare information, social security numbers, customer addresses, checking accounts, bank accounts of customers, scans of checks, all sorts of things. And the way you find that is you attack high-value targets. And what that is, security team, the executives, they're going to have all sorts of useful information. If you can impersonate an executive and phish somebody, you're going to get it pretty much anywhere you want on the network. If the CEO asks for permission to access a certain box on the network, he's going to get it. And if you can get into the CEO's email and send that request to your IT staff, something's going to happen there, and it's probably going to be what you want it to be. We gather credentials because domain admin isn't the final say in network pen testing. You're always going to find boxes that use different credentials. You're going to find file shares that you need certain credentials to access, because sometimes domain admins don't have the ultimate permissions for every single device on the network. So we still want to gather credentials at this point. And during this engagement, we also got the chance to test their security team. For this particular engagement, we had to create a couple domain admins to get their attention. Usually that will send off every alert. So we created a domain admin. We were in the security guy's inbox, so we deleted the email. No reply. No response from the security team. We created another domain admin. Waited a little while. Nobody saw it. And then we finally had to create a third domain admin on their network for them to finally detect it. And we were sitting in their IT security inboxes watching the emails go back and forth. Hey, did you do this? No, I didn't do this. Did you do this? No, I didn't do this. Who did this? And eventually we saw them, exchanging emails, and then we heard a knock on the door of the little room we were sitting in, and there were 3 IT guys standing there. Big map of their network with ports labeled, so they found us. They were looking very confused and very scared because they didn't know that we were there to do a pen test. So sometimes testing the response of IT guys, of IT security is important, because you want to know how your organization is going to respond if you're a real attacker. And so, as pen testers, sometimes we need to up the noise level because it can be unfair to those blue team guys. I know they have got a very, very hard job. I'm under no illusions to that effect. They have the harder job. Pen testers, we have it really easy. We're always going to find a way in. The defenders have to be right every single time. We just have to be right once. Attacker dominance is a very real thing, and it's very important to realize that and test accordingly. Test their response. See what happens when they realize there's been a breach. If they don't notice yet, see what happens when you up the noise level. Create domain admin accounts. Run port scans across every box on the network. Things like that. And trigger some alarms. See what happens. See how the response happens. Sometimes, as pen testers, we also get to do physical penetration. What that means, breaking into buildings, tricking people into letting you into buildings, crawling under fences, all that sort of fun stuff. In this case, we tailgated through doors. It's amazing how people will hold a door open for you, even if you don't have a badge, even if you don't swipe your badge or beep your RFID tag in. Sometimes people will go so far as to put in their PIN numbers and then hold the door for you after the secure door with their PIN number. We had a very friendly gentleman scan his badge, hold the door for us. He's like, "Oh, I see your hands are full. Let me enter my PIN in for you and just follow me in this door." People like to be helpful, so exploit that. Social engineering 101. Take advantage of people whenever and wherever possible. Sneak past reception. If there's a receptionist there who's supposed to check everybody in, walk right past. Sometimes you need to hold your cell phone up to your ear and say, yeah. Oh, well, change the number on that account or something like that. Walk right past. See what happens. If somebody says, "Hey, stop," but they don't come chasing after you, don't stop. It can be that easy. Walk like you know where you're going, and even if you don't know where you're going, people will generally get out of your way. Be nosy. Check out the executive offices. Go there after 7 o'clock when everybody's gone. Nose around. Take a look at their, they've got plane tickets. Oh, they're going there. Nose around. Find their personal information sitting in a file desk with the key in the lock. Be nosy whenever you can, because that's an issue that they're going to want to know about. In this case, we also got to break into the data center. It took us about 20 seconds and a tool that just reaches around under a door and pulls a handle. It is frighteningly easy to do that in most locations, and most people don't know about it. So let them know. Let them know that there are tools that can do this. There was somebody right there watching us, walking past. Nobody said anything while we were breaking in there. That's important because it shows that nobody's paying attention to security, and it shows that, nobody cares if you're doing sketchy shit, and they're not going to bat an eye while you're sitting there breaking into their data center. I took a video of that. We have us walking through the data center, plugging blank drives into their mainframes or whatever was in there, whatever we could get our hands on. And they saw that and they were like, oh shit, we've got an issue. And that is what we want as pen testers. We want to demonstrate, we want to give them that oh shit moment. We have issues. So here's what you can do to fix them. And that second part is also your job. On this physical engagement as well, I had the chance to walk through the snow. I did not anticipate walking through the snow, so I was wearing sneakers and ankle socks. I had frostbite after that, but we got in, we got out, we slipped under a fence. We showed that we could walk around inside this secure facility. Nobody stopped us. We had, took a bunch of selfies in there, went into the admin building for that, took a bunch of selfies in there, checked out things. We were nosing around. Nobody paid attention. Nobody said, hey, maybe you should be wearing safety vests and hard hats like everybody else here. Or, hey, where's your badge? Everybody else here has a badge. Nobody noticed a thing. And that is an issue. And we also found that when we were testing certain other locations, the easy targets that we thought would be easy were actually the hardest, because this was a retailer. They had retail locations. And we thought, we were going to be able to go in, look around, snoop around, get into the back areas, get into the computer room with no problem. We almost got arrested doing that. Didn't quite get arrested. We got a phone call from our point of contact right before we were about to get arrested saying, hey, we should probably call this off because there are cops waiting for you guys. We figured it was a good idea to stop after that and to call it a day. We thought they were going to be easy targets. They weren't. So I have some lessons learned from that engagement as a whole. Number one, don't get cocky. The softest targets that we thought were going to be a piece of cake to walk into and get everything were the hardest. There were cops waiting for us when we tried to get in. Another lesson before this, I didn't anticipate brute forcing passwords to be a thing. But my team lead said, hey, let's try this reverse brute force. We try one password against a list of usernames, and it worked. Password guessing works in 2016. Also, domain admin is not the goal. That's a misconception that I had before I got into the industry, because domain admin is always the thing you strive for in an engagement because it'll give you the keys to the kingdom. That's not always the only goal. You can demonstrate that there are issues even if you don't get domain admin. And that's something that I learned, because file shares, if they're open, you can get all their credit card information without domain admin. You can get all these social security numbers even without getting domain admin. It's a misconception that a lot of people have getting into pen testing. You always need domain admin. You don't. And then the last lesson learned was to always bring boots if it's snowy outside, because frostbite on your ankles is not fun. Wet shoes are not fun, especially when you have to walk 1.5 miles through the snow and slip under a fence and it's cold. And it's miserable. Always bring boots. Always be prepared. And that's part of your gear too. So I blazed through this way too fast. I'm going to have time for questions, plenty of time for questions. Please, if you have questions, ask them to me. That's what I want to do. I want to help people understand what it's like, what my experiences are, how I got here. Feel free to ask anything that you would like to know about pen testing. Yeah. So the question was, have I seen any instance of using a vapor device to trick motion sensors into letting you through a door? I have not. I've seen YouTube videos of it, but otherwise I have not seen that. Yeah. So the question is, what did I do before becoming a pen tester? I had an internship on a pen test team. Before that, I was an unemployed college student. I got lucky. It's very, very hard to break into the industry. I got lucky, and I'm under no illusions there. It's very difficult to break in, but I hope to help people break in by giving them this bit of information. Yeah.
Have you considered your speed skates instead of boots?
The question was, have I considered my speed skates instead of boots? No, I haven't, because that would ruin the blades walking through dirt and grass and rocks and stuff like that. Yeah. One more time? So are the charges eventually dropped if you get arrested? I have not experienced getting arrested yet. I would hope so. I would hope that the get out of jail free card that we got from the client saying we have permission to do this would help with that. But I have not had the opportunity to test that out myself yet. Any other questions? Yeah. So the question was, when you're finally presenting your report, your findings, what does that look like? Usually it'll be a report. It'll be a few dozen pages sometimes. We do not use vulnerability scanners on our pen test, so we don't give you a list of 500 different vulnerabilities. What we do is we show you how we broke in, our attack path, the methods we used to get the information we got, and present that in sort of an easily digestible package, and we've spent a lot of time trying to get that to be as effective as possible without being boring to read. Yeah. Have we found ourselves in a spot where we've had to roll our own tools? We have. We were not very successful, unfortunately, but again, I'm still fairly new to this, so I don't have all the tooling background that would be important for that stuff. There will be times, but I have not come across any and been successful with that yet. The question was, how big is my team and how many people go on an engagement? My team right now is 3 people, 3 testers, 2 of us, and then our team lead. And the biggest engagement I've been on has required 3 testers at a time. It can be anywhere from all of us to 1 of us, depending on the size of the organization. How much travel do I do? At the moment, it's about 25%. That'll depend, on how busy we are selling pen tests. It'll vary by organization. Some people want you on the road Monday through Thursday, and then you're back on Friday. I wouldn't want to do that, but it depends on the organization. It depends on the level of business that you're doing. I saw somebody back there. What's our preferred distro of Linux? Depends really. Everybody has their favorites. Right now we're using Kali. I've used Arch in the past. I've used just Debian or Ubuntu. It really depends. Because Linux is Linux. And you're gonna have the same success with most variants of Linux. Whatever you're most comfortable with, pretty much. Anybody else? Dedicated hardware for what? So the question was, do we use dedicated hardware for our attack machines? We do not. I virtualize it on my laptop. VMware is fine for doing most engagements. Has some issues, of course, but it's not. Most of the time, it's going to be pretty useful. Any other takers? So right now our password cracking rig is still fairly anemic. It's a couple of consumer GPUs in a box. I forget the exact the numbers right now, but it's nothing special because it doesn't need to be for most passwords. If we do a lot more password cracking, maybe we'll upgrade it, but for now it's fine. It's just 2 graphics cards. They're high, mid-range, and that's all you really need to crack most passwords. Yep.
So you're saying it's not like quad 1080s?
No, it is not quad 1080s. I saw someone over there. So the question was, do we create our own staging environment for external phases of engagements? Yes, we do. We spin up, VPSs as we need them. We come from as many angles as we can because we don't want any one of our boxes to get burned, or we don't want it to impact operations if one of our external boxes gets burned. And we've recently tried to imitate that with our actual our listeners, our exploitation boxes. We've tried to create no single point of failure so that if they block this one box, we'll be screwed. We don't want to have that happen. So it's kind of ad hoc right now, but we have usually a couple different boxes going at any given time. What are we doing when we're not on an active engagement? We are doing research. We are looking at the latest and greatest tools, latest and greatest techniques. We're trying to implement things for ourselves. We're upping our tradecraft. I think that any good pen test team should be doing that because you always have to keep up with the pace of technology. You always want to be on the cutting edge, even if it's not required, because you will come across an environment where that is required, and you will have to up your game in order to get the results you want. Yeah. How do we deal with the fallout of possibly breaking production? Politely, with humility. Own your mistakes. Say that this is our fault, but you should have language written into your contract that says you are not financially liable. Yeah, make sure you've got good lawyers or whatever. Just be polite. I've never broken production so far, but I've gotten lucky. It's just a matter of time when you're doing any gig like this. So you have to be polite. You have to admit your mistakes. You have to make sure that language is written into your contracts that means you're not liable for your mistakes. Yes. How often do we get caught? I don't know, just off the top of my head. I've done a few engagements. I would say it's 30-40% of the time, whether that's intentional or unintentional. Getting caught can both be a good thing and a bad thing, as I discussed. It can help the security team make sure they know that what they're doing is the right steps. They're looking for the right things. Other times it can just be we made a mistake and it's the pen tester's fault that you got caught. So maybe 30-40% of the time. Any more questions? If you don't have any questions, I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards on Twitter, on IRC. I'm in the MySec channel on Freenode. It's a good channel full of cool people. You should check it out. Or you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm 001Spartan. Happy to talk afterwards. Feel free to come and bug me. I'm always happy to talk with people. Thank you for coming to my talk. I hope it's useful. Thank you very much.